And now, friends, on this holy day, let us gather in peace and unity, as one before the grace and grandeur of life, as children before its great and loving mystery. In this hour, may we know anew the holy joy of human lives growing together, so that this hour will imbue all those to come with that same gift. Come, let us worship together.
Well, good morning again, beloveds. It is so good to be with you this morning. We are now a couple of weeks into September. We are a week away for beginning our, what I'm now calling Sunday Cool programming. That's starting next Sunday. And so in the in between, we like to lift up all of those of us that are students. We're students of life. We may be going to school, through home. We may be going outside of our homes to do so, but it's a time that we like to acknowledge and bless the students here within our congregation. So I invite you, if you have one close by, to grab your backpack or your school bag or your briefcase or a handbag, whatever you might have that you'd like to have there blessed and have it close to you. And also to give a shout out to our children and youth ministry volunteers too. They will be honored, all our leaders and assistants honored at this time. And if you would like, change your view to gallery view, especially our young people. If you're joining us this morning, change that view to gallery view. Look at all the people you know, those you don't know, maybe names that are written up because we're not yet in a position we want to be on screen, which I understand and respect. But names we might know, names we might not know. And what I want to hold up, especially for our young people, is that of all the people here, known and unknown, that we care and love you, and that during your school days we will be with you. For those who go to school outside of your home, we'll be with you on the drive or the walk to school and on the bus. We'll be with you in the hallway, in the lunchroom, on the playground, in your classrooms. We'll be with those of you who complete your studies at home, whether that's taking online courses or homeschool. We'll be with all of you on field trips, music concerts, that art or science show, drama club, your sports games, all the extracurriculars you might be doing. And we'll especially be with all of you as you are doing your homework. We will be with you, loving you, cheering you on, thinking of you and your successes, and when things might feel difficult. And you can remember us when you need us, because we're going to give you a blessing charm that looks a little like this. It says, "We've got your back," to put on your bag or backpack, or maybe hang it in a special place near where you do your schoolwork at home. And we also have additional blessing charms for our children and youth ministry volunteers. We've added a little heart to theirs in recognition and gratitude for the care and love that each of our children and youth ministry volunteers are sharing from all of your hearts with our children and youth. So again, they say, "We've got your back," and then blessed by the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Princeton. I'll read it out, and it's that little picture of the front of our building is on there too. So for those of you that may not be able to make it into the building, just feel free to shoot me an email, jennifer@uuprinceton.org, and I can mail one of those out to you. So again, bringing your bags forward for this blessing, which is based on one written by my colleague Karen Johnson. It's for all children and for all of us students of life. Whether we carry backpacks or briefcases, gym bags, cell phones, wallets, or handbags, even when you are away from our congregation, you carry the heart of Unitarian Universalism with you wherever you go. May you feel curiosity all of your days. May your imagination catch fire. May you find courage when it is necessary. May confusion lead you to better questions. May you feel compassion towards those around you and they toward you. May you feel known, and may you know others. And may you speak up for those who are ignored. As your spirit's home, we are made stronger when you share what you learn. So we ask, bring what you learn of the world back to our community together. May we carry this blessing into the coming year and in all the years to come. Amen. Blessed be. Many blessings to all of us, students of life.
Good morning. Little technical glitches on our end, so we're just making the best of it. Hi. If you couldn't hear me earlier, I apologize. My name is Darcy Erickson. I'm a worship associate here. And if I haven't met you yet face to face, I look forward to that event when it occurs. And until then, I hope you are well. And for all of you I have met and are at home, I look forward to when we can be face to face again. So as per regular with me, I'm going to start with an original haiku before I share my thoughts on the reflection. Humans are fractals. Reality, reflection, hate is self-loathing. So I remember coming home in 6th grade, irate at stuff that happened in school and complaining about a particular classmate, and my mom listened quietly. And when I finished my tirade, she said, "Be careful what you see in others. It's probably a reflection of yourself you're not yet ready to see." Ouch. That was not the sympathetic ear that I was expecting, from my mom. She was supposed to support me, right? But I thought about that when I started this reflection, because I think that since we're all one, if we're hating on somebody else, we're actually hating a part of ourselves. So that makes sense. And I think it goes all the way back. That lesson goes all the way back to 6th grade for me. And I'm not quite sure that I'm finished with it. I'm probably not, but I am definitely more aware of it now. And as I thought about what we're doing today, I actually came across a book title called Love Your Enemies: How to Break the Anger Habit and Be a Whole Lot Happier. Haven't read it yet, disclosure, but it's definitely now on my read list. A quote from in that book is, "At the inner enemy stage, when we're still learning to manage our addiction to anger, aiming for love pushes us too far. It is unrealistic to expect to immediately switch from anger and hate to compassion and love. Patience is the middle ground, the place of tolerance, forbearance, and in time, forgiveness." And so for me, as I think about this topic, that hit home. And I found myself just repeating the same words over and over again, like figuring out how to love myself, how to remember that people are always, from my perspective, people always do the best they can where they are. And so if I'm at conflict with somebody, I'm looking inside to see how can I adjust. And sometimes it's about setting a boundary with that person and loving them from a distance, and sort of like the meditation that Reverend Bill just led us through, hoping that they can, and praying that they can be at peace, and that allowing me to be at peace. And as very different for myself, I'm short on words this morning. And when I got to the end of my reflection, I didn't have more haiku words. So I'm going to end repeating the one that I started with. Humans are fractals. Reality reflected. Hate is self-loathing. Thank you ever so much.
Before I begin the sermon, I'd like to say a big thank you to Herb and Eva Foster for purchasing this sermon at the 2021 services auction that we have here at the congregation. It's a fundraiser for UU Princeton, an annual one that we have every February. And I always offer up for bid a sermon topic. The highest bidder can let me know what they'd like me to preach on, and I do my best sometime. This is the 2021 winner, and the 2022 winner was Alice Deenan. So sometime pretty soon, Alice, if you're watching, I'll be in contact so that we can do that service too, so that when we hit next February, our fellowship auction, we'll have a fresh new item to bid on. But thank you again, Eva and Herb, both for bidding on this and for the really, really interesting and rich topic that you chose. It's been fun and difficult in a good way to wrestle with this topic that you chose. I really appreciate it. And now for the sermon. I was once sitting at a stoplight, waiting to go forward, watching as a driver next to me thought about making a right turn on red. They could do so if oncoming traffic allowed for it, and whether or not the oncoming traffic allowed for that seemed open for debate. The driver next to me seemed to think that traffic did not allow for a right turn to be safely made as they sat there watching and waiting. The driver behind them seemed to think that traffic did allow for that right-hand turn to be made, or so it would seem from the short beeps that came from their horn. When nothing happened, the short beeps turned into a longer, let's say medium-length beep. And after that did not produce the desired result either, the second driver firmly pressed the horn and did not let up. The response of the first driver was to ignore the short beeps when those came, just pretend they weren't there. Then with the medium beep, the first driver did the hands up thing while staring in the rear view window. And when the long, never-ending beep happened, the first driver decided to fight fire with fire, and they laid on their horn as well. I do question that response, parts because I'm not really sure that the second driver could hear it, and I know that the cars coming through the intersection could. The resulting cacophony probably signaled alarm more than anger to those not sitting next to the parties, and I'm sure it startled other drivers passing by. That was all lost to the two drivers caught up in their blustery, blaring anger. It seemed to become a game of chicken, really, who would relent first. And as it turned out, the first driver relented first, but only because the light changed and they felt comfortable making their turn. It was an example of frustration turning into anger, turning into wrath. It was thankfully more comical than dangerous and was resolved when the two drivers went on their ways, or so I would assume. But it reminded me that even the briefest of exchanges are those in which we imprint part of our lives and spirits upon others. Our momentary frustrations thrust forth upon someone else can spiral into something all-consuming. Unabated passions or raw feelings divorced from a concern for the other can become a part of the other's reality. Or to say it a different way, when we aren't ready to deal with our own baggage, we can load the luggage of others instead, whether they invited us to or not, and place in their lives burdens of frustration, anger, wrath, jealousy, all the stuff that we really need to deal with ourselves. If we can't or won't or haven't thought of dealing with our burdens, we end up foisting them upon others, making their loads heavier instead of lighter. And for a while, many will bear that burden, but most won't forever. They'll come to seek a lighter journey, empty themselves of burdens they never agreed to carry or have carried for too long, and things then get lonely and resentful. This is a really bad spiral. And sometimes people who have nothing to do with us relationally get caught up in it all, and their bodies and lives are impacted as well as they witness the anger or alarm or pain and don't know why it's there, but know that it still makes them anxious. Even without a known cause, it still startles and hurts. That's a big reason that the wise ones of the world's faiths have taught in different ways and measures the notion that we should expect to reap what we sow, or understand the cyclical karmic sense of life, or know that every action has a reaction. And so every action, every word, and in some perspectives, every thought impacts and forms the world and life around us. And in our faith, our chief collective concern is one of action or impact, or as I usually say, blessing. We embrace all sorts of theological and spiritual diversity as long as they bless the world in ways that create communities more beloved, more caring, more just, more merciful, more forgiving. In our faith, the interesting question is, what do you believe? But the more important one is, how does that help you bless others? For that is the question greater than all others for us, not one of belief, not one of individual choice or covenantal restrictions. It's one of blessing. How are we serving the good, the true, the just, the kind, the loving? And so we are to live as we wish the world to be. We are to love, to forgive, to serve, and to grow in the Spirit. And if we can love our enemy, we can love anyone, which is one reason we are taught to love our enemy, because that practice makes us stronger in love. Love is not a switch to be turned on and off, but a discipline to be practiced over time. And if we want to bless the world with more love, we have to be open in our hearts to love one another, the stranger, the world, and even the enemy with intention and discipline. This does not mean without boundaries, and it does not mean all at once. Sometimes loving our enemy just starts with not hating them quite as much, but that's a start. And it's an important one that respects that sometimes our enemies are those enemies for good reasons. And the command to love them isn't one that turns them into anything else. They may even stay enemies, even as we begin to soften our hatred of them, because our practice of love has led us to that place. This can be a slow, gritty, and human process, or at least that's the only way I can imagine it really unfolding. As one who has never experienced a cathartic mountaintop moment of loving connection with all that was and is and ever will be, as one whose faith and often conflicted and aspirational ethics are very much here on the ground in the beauty and muck of all the good and bad that we are to one another and the planet, I see this sort of love for enemy coming in fits and spurts in relationship with larger life. But I also see it as something that strengthens love, this practice of praying for the enemy, of remembering their humanity, of not questioning even for a second God's divine presence in their hearts. The Buddhists often include this in their metta meditation, which is the one we had earlier in the service, a very popular loving kindness meditation of many unique forms. They often include wishes of peace and safety, enough, and other good things expressly for the enemy. It's immensely useful for those of us not ready to love some of our enemies, because it asks us instead to just pray for them. Don't worry about loving them. Just start with praying for them. It reminds me of a time many, many years ago when I debated LGBTQ plus rights on a small local news show with a conservative colleague, ministerial colleague of another faith. We weren't enemies, to be sure, in any way, but we were a bit wary of each other as we prepared to disagree on TV. We greeted one another cordially and both seemed a little uncomfortable until my colleague said, "Brother, can we pray before we go on?" And he did. He for me and our time together, I for him and our time together, with the interviewer who was very much interested in us really not liking each other because it would make better TV, watching us, seeming to deflate a little before our eyes. And we debated and heartily disagreed and sought not the same goals, but practiced similar respect. And that was the last time either of us was invited on that show. We were too cordial. To love the enemy strengthens our love and can be approached through a spiritual practice of prayer or wishing blessings upon them. We can start not with love, but with less antipathy, built through stubborn, prayerful practices of blessing. To love the enemy is also a way of acknowledging that we are probably unliked by someone or some people. We may not be anyone's enemy, or maybe we are, but regardless, even if we are still worthy of love, and we are still loved. This is our theology and tradition. Not that people are perfect, not that inherent goodness means complete goodness or the absence of evil, pride, greed, selfishness, etc. No, it's that even though we're not perfect, and even though we all fall and miss the mark, we are still worthy of love, and we are still loved. Beyond everything we've done and all we've harmed, in the myriad ways in which our spirit still seeks to mature, we are loved, as is everyone else. And so our process of growing in love for the enemy becomes a human representation of that divine and original grace. We practice love because we are loved, always and forever, and beyond all merit. And to love the enemy is to disempower it, for that which we hate controls us. That against which we war determines so much about our lives, our spirits, and our relationships. The object may not even know of our hatred, may not even know how much toxicity and negativity and sickness we thread into our lives out of our aversion to them, but those all take a toll on our bodies and minds. This is really the case when we spend time hating people we've never met and never will, people who have no idea who we are, who don't care, who in some cases profit off of a collective hatred that ends up empowering their celebrity. We speak of our hatred such that their notoriety grows, which serves their ends, makes us sick, and seeds greater contempt in the world. A way to create something different is to not empower the hateful with hatred, but to disempower it with the slow and building love. This was Martin Luther King Jr.'s entire approach, and it was an approach that practically accomplished more for civil rights in America than all other approaches at the time combined. And that's because it was based not on the moral weakness of hatred, but on the moral strength of love. There are times when it is much more difficult to love than it is to hate. There are times when hatred is the easier and less demanding path. That's because it can feed our pride and keep us feeling safe in our silos. But King showed that if we choose love instead, even love for enemy, love will win out in the end. Yes, love is more difficult to practice because it's stronger than hatred. Hatred asks nothing of us. Love asks everything of us. Hatred keeps us small. Love demands that we grow. Hatred assures us that we're perfect. Love shows us our flaws and believes we can fix them. Hatred isolates. Love connects. Hatred restricts. Love breathes. Hatred imprisons. Love frees. Hatred starves. Love feeds. Hatred yells. Love sings. Hatred hurts the self, the many, the divine within. Love heals the self, the many, the divine within. Hatred harms. Love makes whole. And hatred seeks hatred, which is what our children will grow into. And likewise, love practiced today builds a more loving world tomorrow, and that's what we owe our children. People may give us every reason to hate them today, and perhaps we've offered others a few good reasons ourselves, but when we live in that space, when we let it become comfortable, when it's what we watch on the news or listen to on podcasts or all we can talk about because it consumes us, when we don't at least challenge hatred within with a practice or two of love, we are turning our backs on those to come. We are giving up on them. We're choosing for them what harms us instead of trying to leave for them a better world. Love your enemy doesn't mean that your enemy suddenly becomes magically not your enemy anymore. And it doesn't mean that your enemy hasn't done things that are not worthy of love, to say the least. It's not to say that hatred isn't understandable, sometimes warranted and natural. It's to say that living in the grips of hatred is unhealthy for one and everyone. It's to say that tomorrow's world is being created anew right now by us today. And so what shall we create? The hatred that only ever harmed and fractured, or the love that has occasionally healed and made whole? We want the generations to come to live in our examples of forgiveness and healing and justice and loving kindness, not those of hatred. And while we may not be able to fully love an enemy in our lives, we can at least stop hating them so much, stop investing so much in that hatred. We can pray for them. We can know that though they harmed us or others or caused misery, they are still loved. And we can add less toxicity and antipathy to the world and instead bring about a little more health for us, for everyone, and for those to come. It's like the old Buddhist story about the teacher who was tired of the negativity of her students. They were always complaining about this and that endlessly day after day. And so she had one go get a big glass of water, and then she had another student pour a whole bunch of salt in the water and ask each student to take a sip. And she asked them what they tasted when they took a sip, and they all said it was gross, too salty to drink, wasn't good water anymore. And then she walked them down to a clear flowing river and poured the same amount of salt in its waters. And then she asked them each to cup their hands and take a drink. And when they tasted the water, it was fresh and cool and clean. Salt has been added, she said, but they couldn't taste it because it flowed away from the river with the river. And this was the lesson. The negativity in the students was polluting their minds and bodies. They needed to let it flow away so that they could be nourished by a river of life that met each thirst with equal grace. They needed to let go of that which was harming them, even though it had become what had bonded them. But in letting go, they would find a new bond of affection and health and wholeness, and most importantly, a bond that would actually ease their thirst. So too with hatred, so too with all that makes one more desperate for our thirst for the good, the just, the merciful. May we let it go so that hatred flows away and prayers can be voiced, and practices of love can be built in ways that will bless us and our neighbors and our enemies, and most important, all those to come. May it be so, and amen. For our benediction, go forth grateful for the moments before you, the breath within you, the people among you, and the Spirit guiding you toward lives of greater love, beauty, and kindness. And go forth knowing that you are held always, and always with neighbor and stranger, by that great love of no beginning and never ending. Go in peace, and amen.